In some of my videos, I've made some critical comments about the whole girl power, girl boss initiative that you see in many corporate environments as part of the broader woke agenda. So let us see what we can learn from some of these personality types. And let me know in the comments how highly you rank their career advice, how useful you think it is, because maybe I was wrong all along, and I'm always willing to take on constructive criticism and see what we can learn from them and see if we believe their stories and find their information helpful.
Are tired of the mental gymnastics they have to go through to work in corporate spaces. I just got off a call with a client who was telling me about how sad she is that this leader that she's been with for 3 years is leaving, and how sad the rest of her department is that this person is leaving, because she's the first leader she's had where she felt like she can be her authentic self. She could show up to a remote meeting without makeup and she would be completely fine with that. She could wear whatever she wanted. She didn't feel like she had to code switch. And to me, it's so telling. It's so telling of how scarce that leadership quality is. The ability to allow other people to be humans without you interfering with your own biases and determinations about how they should react or be in the workplace in order for you to give them respect. It just is such a testament to how infrequent we are seeing that kind of leadership these days, and how infrequent it is to see leaders actually tell the truth, how infrequent it is to see leaders make bold decisions that sacrifice their own well-being, utilize their power to make sure that they're continuing to create the kind of cultures that we're actually desiring to be in. And it just keep reiterating, the corporate cultures that exist today are not working anymore.
So firstly, we've got this point around makeup, right? If you're going to work, it shouldn't be too dependent on how you look, right? And if you are overly concerned with that, then maybe you should raise that kind of consideration for yourself. Why are you so obsessed with how you look? And do you need your manager to make you feel comfortable about not wearing makeup on Zoom meetings? And then this raises the question, to what extent is this useful advice? To what extent has the workplace been changed? And nowadays, the workplace is about absolutely everything apart from the work, right? That's like the lowest priority. It's about people's emotions, how self-conscious they feel, whether they're getting enough validation and attention from others. It's like emotion. That's what it becomes, right? And it becomes about, how like a coworker might feel if they're feeling sad or upset. People being their authentic self at work, what people wear to work. That's what it's kind of become. And that's why a lot of this advice is just completely junk advice that have nothing to do with the actual work itself, right? And this whole thing about, let's say, being emotional at work, giving attention at work, and giving respect and biases at work, all of these points and these kind of useless career advice is basically everything apart from, like I say, being strategic about work to get a promotion, or being strategic at work and getting a good work-life balance. It's all about, the dynamic that would typically exist between a man and a woman in a relationship, and what a woman would want from her husband or her boyfriend. She's kind of looking for some of that validation and attention from her manager and how she presents herself. So it's kind of a weird dynamic. And firstly, she mentions around changing corporate culture, which I agree there are some issues there. But the issue in terms of leaders telling the truth, firstly, that's not going to happen. If you're going to change corporate culture, it would have a radical change that would be required for leaders to tell the truth. You should just assume, if you are in the corporate environment, the leaders are not going to tell the truth, and you have to read in between the lines of what they're actually saying and what they're actually implying. And one of my videos from a little while back was around Amazon and how they use all this manipulative doublespeak when it comes to telling employees to return to the office, right? And how they were going to essentially implying in between the lines that they're going to do some layoffs of middle management. You need those type of skills to read in between the lines. You don't need skills about whether you should or shouldn't wear makeup and how a manager should make you feel about whether you wear makeup to a Zoom meeting or not, right? And then she mentions bold decisions, and she's talking about bold decisions in terms of making employees feel comfortable. But the real bold decisions in a business should be, okay, are we going to start a new business venture that's going to help grow the business? Are we going to have a massive hiring or layoff because we need to make major changes in the business? That's bold decisions. But because now everything's about emotions and making women feel more comfortable in the workplace, you end up having a lot of people where they just don't get that What do you want leaders to sacrifice? Couldn't be more concerned with how their female employees feel. It just doesn't make sense. And firstly, the whole general thing about bold decisions in the corporate environment, you're not going to get bold decisions from people, especially now in the corporate world where even senior management, they're only there for, a certain amount of time. It could be 3 years, 5 years, even 10 years. You're not going to see a lot of people in long-term roles unless they're maybe super senior or have their strong ties to the company. And in many cases, managers are going to think about good short-term decisions, which are not going to be bold long-term decisions. They're thinking about what's in their short-term interest to earn the bonus for the next year or two. So this kind of bold decision requirement, you're not going to get this kind of honorable, bold leadership in corporate environments. That's currently not how it works, right? So that's just, sorry about that, that's just not going to happen. And there's a level of delusion. What is she expecting, and what is the person she's mentioning who's her friend or whatever is concerned about, like say makeup and things like that? It's delusional to expect that everyone's going to start pandering to your emotional requirements, right? And when she talks about creating a culture that employees desire to be in, I agree that's an important thing. But the way that is framed in a way like, oh, it has to be some kind of community or family environment, or people have to care about each other. And I think you can go to work and have professionalism and respect for each other, but end of the day, you can't manufacture a community, family feel where people care about your emotions and giving you attention and things like that. That's something that you'd find in a relationship, right? So what it sounds like, what she wants from her manager, this leadership role, is something that would come in the form of her father or a husband or a boyfriend. And it's what it is, it's creating a very risky environment for men. What can you say about women? What can't you say about women? And often you have women like this who've given incredible power. HR Karen meme, I'm sure you're aware of Karens and the concept of that. These type of people will literally police men's behavior. You might have a highly accomplished man who's maybe senior management, been working for 20, 30 years, and he's seen this cultural change. And a woman like this would be in HR kind of lecturing him on how to speak with women, you basically have women like this who are policing men's behavior in the corporate environment. So like I say, you might have a highly accomplished man, but he'll have his behavior being monitored and tracked and altered by a woman who's primary purpose is being paid quite a high salary, maybe a high six-figure salary, to essentially police the behavior of men under the guidance of some kind of gender equality HR requirement. So it can create quite a difficult scenario. So I'm not sure if this is the best type of advice we're getting here.
They need to change.
Just a friendly reminder, our body's stress response isn't there so we can finish that presentation on time. It's literally there to save our life from danger. Take a breath. Relax. It's a job, not a lion. You have no business being that stressed at work. Do your job, go home, and forget work even exists. You are not being paid enough to let that job keep you from living your life and getting enough sleep.
Cool. So let's go back a second. So the whole thing is, she's got a good point. I think this is a good bit of advice. You don't take work too seriously. A lot of the times, you feel highly stressed at work environments, like, if you do one thing wrong, if you're a bit slow on a particular project, it could get you fired down the line. And it's important to be healthily detached from work. There's a weird dynamic at work where you have to pretend to be emotionally invested, but in reality, you're emotionally detached. Because the only way you can really survive in some of these high tense corporate environments, high pressure, tense environments, is basically being slightly detached. You can't just, you have to pretend that you're super invested when you're actually not. Otherwise, you'll get management feedback, and I've had it in the past, where they think, you're not too invested in the work, you come across like you're just disinterested. And I'll be like, no, I am interested, but I keep a healthy distance emotionally, so I'm not like overly worked up about everything that goes right or wrong. And this is the whole thing about the stress response at work. She's making great points there. You're not paid enough to kind of, be stressed like your life is in danger every day, a layoff or some stress at work. And, she did kiss the screen. Personally, I feel violated. Hopefully someone in the comments can call HR, because I feel like that was inappropriate. But what's interesting about this personality type, this is the typical kind of HR Karen manager type that will typically cancel someone for saying something slightly that could trigger her emotions. So it's interesting the different personality types you see that kind of reoccur within the corporate environment.
Overachieving gets you, it doesn't get you more pay, it doesn't get you a promotion, it gets you a hunchback, it gets you carpal tunnel from sitting like this all day, it gets you blue light glasses that strain your eyeballs. Don't Excel at your 9 to 5. Become a trophy wife. God.
So that's a very short clip, right? So often the main driver, and if you look back through feminism and how it worked, the main driver was this demographic of women, right? It was mainly white women pushing for girl power, suffragettes. You can look into the origins of feminism and women being encouraged to be in the workplace. And it's like, they've got everything they wanted. There's tons of bias against men. Men can be openly falsely accused, false allegations of any type of wrongdoing when it comes to women. It doesn't matter what the evidence is or a complete lack of evidence. If a woman puts on the right impression within a corporate environment, an employee harassment proceedings, a divorce proceeding, she can get whatever she wants and take a lot of money from a company or from a man in the workplace environment or in a divorce settlement, things like that, right? So it's kind of like they've got everything they want and now they're whinging about it. You're in the corporate environment, you're getting preferential benefits for promotions and things like that, and hiring practices. And it's like, if you can't deal with the work stress, then why have you fought so hard to be in that environment, right? And she's making the joke, or kind of being serious, about becoming a trophy wife. And it's like, hold on, for decades, women of your demographic have supposedly fought against that. You don't want to be a trophy wife, you don't want to be a housewife. So it's like, you get the impression from some of these women that they want the social status that comes with work, but not the sacrifice of the hard work, right? And it looks like feminism failing again, right? It's not resulting in the outcome they want. What do you want? The social status of, like I say, working a high-power corporate job, all the not the trappings, but all the benefits of that, having a corner office, wearing, office suits or whatever that would be for women, having expensive materialistic items, but all that stuff comes with being a trophy wife. But if you want to do that in the workplace because you want to be a strong, independent girl boss, then you're going to have to deal with the actual work that's involved there, right? But it's like, so many men, I'm sure you're going to agree with me in the comments about these type of scenarios, but it's like, you can't go to work and actually say it yourself. And that's why I'm here to kind of tell the truth.
High achiever, welcome. Are you an overachieving leader who keeps getting work piled on your plate even when you're totally maxed out? Because they know you're going to deliver and you won't say no. And you never use your PTO or have energy for anyone or anything outside of work. And sometimes you'll just catch yourself daydreaming about quitting this job and doing something boring. Because boring sounds pretty glorious right now. But will it be? Because as a high achiever who did leave their hard job for a boring job, it didn't go totally as planned. I thought leaving my high visibility role for some chill, boring job where no one could bother me all day long would just alleviate all of my anxieties. Except I felt worse in the easy job. Because guess what I brought with me to the easy job? My inability to say no, my deep-rooted desire to prove myself and everyone's validation. And as someone inherently driven by some challenge, a shit ton of mundane work was actually pretty mind-numbing. The truth is, my challenging job didn't have to be that challenging. I was making it way more challenging than it needed to be. And not having boundaries there doesn't make them magically appear somewhere new. So if you're anything like me and my high achieving clients, I'm not so sure an easier job is the answer. I think you might need to stop making your life so hard. And that requires getting...
So, again, some classic never happy with any scenario advice, right? She said supposedly a hard job with high visibility, which is typically like a senior role where she had to do a lot of work and was accountable to a lot of senior management above her. But then she went to an easy job where she got the validation she wanted, in a sense, and now she's not happy. So she wasn't happy with the high visibility job with lots of work. She's not happy with the easy job. So it's like, again, it's all about emotions and getting validation externally, playing the victim. It's too little work, it's too much work, it's never good enough. So it's like, at what point, what do you want from the world? Do you get what I mean? What do you want from the corporate environment that's already incredibly biased in your favor? I remember, for example, during the whole lockdown, this is something that you'll see throughout any time period, but particularly during the lockdown period, there were so many mandatory training sessions we had to attend where it was middle-aged white women basically lecturing everyone else on emotions and how to deal with communicating with other co-workers. And this demographic has incredible power. They have the most power in the workplace environment. A lot of the white men in the corporate environment are kind of the old guard, like the older guys, maybe 40s, 50s. And as they are kind of transitioning out of the workforce over the next decade or so, these women are basically have all the power positions, all the middle management, senior middle management power positions. The entire corporate environment is based around them. All the work social events are based around making them the center of attention. And I'd see this time and time again throughout different work social events, Christmas parties, team picnics and whatever. And everything was based around their sensibilities, their taste and what they prefer. Increasingly, it's not based around white men, black men, Asian men, women of other demographics, other racial demographics, is really based around what they want, and they've kind of got everything they want, and they're still whinging about it. And it's completely ridiculous if you really think about it. Because just before we move on, an interesting point here, I noticed that in the West, in the corporate environment, things are becoming incredibly biased in favoring this demographic. But when it comes to doing a lot of the graft and the intense work, yes, we do definitely have some of that in the West. But a lot of that gets offshored. And where does it get offshored and outsourced to? India, in Mumbai. And I'm ethnically Asian, ethnically Indian, and I feel like in the corporate environment, for me, and I'm sure many of you in the comments too, you feel like a second-class citizen. And it's like, okay, I feel like a second-class citizen here. There's hiring and promotion benefits in favor of this demographic on the screen right now. And then also there's a level of like imperialism or colonialism, however you want to word it, where a lot of the actual work is getting drafted to my ethnicity back in India. They're doing the work for a third of the salary that you'd get paid in the West. And they're overworked. And we've seen incidents, some of my recent videos have covered that, where they're doing a lot of the hard work and not getting paid adequately for it. And then here we have to always favor this demographic. So it's like, in the West, put white women on a pedestal and give them promotion and hiring benefits. Outside the West, dump the work on, in many cases, in places like India, where the men or the woman will do the actual work for a third of the salary. And they're still not good enough. I don't know who the corporate environment is really working well for now. I don't think it's working well for many people, unless you're already established in quite a senior role as maybe an older white man, or you're one of these women who are getting the kind of benefits of a lot of these biases, right? And I know there's nuances there. I'll see in the comments, some people might not agree, and that's fine. I'm just speaking on my experiences and some things I've seen, and I understand there are exceptions to the rule. That's a bit of a generalized, broad statement.
For a business consulting firm, and I am partner support. So there are 3 partners in the small practice that I worked in, and I am running 98% of any document that goes in front of a client. So I'm running all the financials, I'm doing all the reports, I'm doing all the interviews, I'm doing all of the research, and I'm presenting it, and then I'm in the meeting. So I'm not only creating all the documents, but I have to be in all the meetings. And I was averaging about 6 hours of meetings per day, which is insane when you think of it. So what did my overperforming little self do? I got to the office at 6 a.m. so that I could have 3 hours before anybody walked into the office where I could slam all my work out, and then I could just go to meetings. And then I would stay after and make sure that I got all my information downloaded from my brain, and I wouldn't even get home till 9 o'clock at night. And I would work on weekends. And I was bitter, resentful, and when I asked for a raise, I was entitled as fuck. And honestly, I don't see that as a bad thing. It didn't go over super well because I basically had to say, but don't you see, I'm doing like 3 people's jobs and I'm being compensated as one person. And I remember my boss, who in retrospect was a really good mentor for me, but it was a tough lesson. He looked at me and he said, well, whose fault is that? Who came in here and worked the job for 3 people and acted like it was normal? And I was so pissed when he said that, because I was like, are you kidding me? You should be so grateful that I'm here busting my ass for you. But he really flipped it on me. And he said, you're the one that taught me that you working this much was normal for you. And if it's not normal for you, then you've done yourself a great disservice.
So this is typical Karen behavior. She looks like a Karen with the short hair. And this is what I would try to point out in my career advice, which is actually useful. You should always work at like 50% capacity of what your workability or your work output could be. And I understand 50% sounds a bit low, if not, you aim for 80% if you have more work to do and things like that. The whole point is, if you overwork yourself like she did, why would people do that, or why would a woman in this position do it? She's kind of looking for external validation and approval and the sympathy and the empathy of being an overworked female employee or an employee in general. If you're looking for this kind of like sympathy, empathy, validation, attention thing, it's going to backfire. You're not going to get paid more for that. And what you're looking for is emotional fulfillment, which again would come in a relationship, in your personal life and not at work. And the whole thing is, if she has 6 hours of work meetings, and I've seen women in this similar position who have all these work meetings, do you just like talking to people? Are you actually being productive in those meetings, getting work done? And a lot of them, they're just chit-chatting throughout long meetings. I remember so many examples of this where, we'd be discussing on the trading floor something important, something time sensitive, and female co-workers would start the call chit-chatting about podcasts, about Enron. Enron had a big accounting scandal that's quite famous from several decades ago. Chit-chatting about all this other stuff, and it's like 10, 15 minutes will go by before we get on with the work. So some of these meetings are completely waste of time chit-chatting. And if you want to have meetings, you can organize them in a much more strategic and effective way than having 6 hours of work meetings in the day and then complaining like you're some kind of workplace martyr. And this type of demographic, they love positioning themselves as some kind of workplace martyr. They're doing so much work, having so much meetings, and then you're like, how much of this is actually productive? I'm sure you can organize it in a more efficient way. You're not gonna get any special points for overworking yourself. And some of the language she uses is like over emotional. It sounds like being kind of wild, out of control, not very professional. And kind of the way has this dynamic with a manager, kind of demanding that's really only this demographic gets away with that. I want you to imagine any other demographic apart from this, they wouldn't get away with this type of behavior or kind of whinging like this. And so that's what I'm saying. When you go to work, again, work at a capacity that you can manage. Realize you're working for money. You're not going to get any special points for overworking yourself. And looking for appreciation and validation, that comes in the form of a personal relationship, nothing that you should get from your manager or seek for your manager, right? So I guess, on retrospect, I started this looking for if I had any constructive criticism I could get from some of these girl boss, girl power types. Maybe I have been wrong in the past, but I think it's time for me to apologize. But I apologize for absolutely nothing. I've been very accurate in a lot of my feedback and analysis of this demographic. I was right all along. I mean, you can look back. I always understand there are exceptions to this. I'm not saying every woman is like this. I'm not saying every girl power or every girl power, girl boss manager is a girl boss. She might just be a manager doing a good job. And I've had actually very good female managers, I had worked with some quite senior people in the C-level or C-suite level roles. They've been quite good. I've had some good managers, female and male, regardless, throughout my career. But there is a specific demographic of girl boss types, if you want to call it that, who really have had a detrimental impact on the workplace environment, a sense of entitlement, a false sense of emotional manipulation that they get away with. Now, if you're new to the channel, I've worked in the finance industry for over 10 years at Goldman, Morgan Stanley, many other top investment banks. And I offer a career advice service that's going to give you genuine, useful career advice, unlike what you've seen today. And there's a link in description, and I'll be happy to speak with you and give you the real advice you need to succeed and have financial freedom, time freedom. These are all the things we focus on throughout my sessions. Thanks for listening. 2 recommended videos on your screen right now, and I'll see you next time.